Jesus never prayed the way you've been taught to pray. Read that again because it matters. Every time the Gospels show him going off before dawn, walking away from the crowd, climbing a hill alone, he wasn't reciting a list of requests into the sky. He was doing something else, something older, something almost nobody talks about anymore. There's a word for it buried in ancient texts that most churches never open. The word is monad. And there's another word, one that sounds like a threat, one that shows up in Gnostic scripture again and again, Archons. And here's the wild part. What Jesus was actually doing threatened them. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at prayer completely differently. And you might never say the same words in the same way again. You've prayed before. Maybe last night. Maybe years ago, on your knees, begging for something to change. And maybe you felt nothing back. Just silence. Just your own voice bouncing off a ceiling that never opens. Here's my honest opinion, and I know some people won't like it. Most prayer, the way it's practiced today, is a one-way transmission into a void. You speak outward. You wait. Nothing answers. And so you either give up, or you keep repeating the same words, hoping repetition will somehow force a response. But what if that was never the design? What if the actual teaching, the one hidden underneath centuries of ritual, wasn't about asking something far away to act on your behalf? What if it was about something completely different? Not a request, a connection. Not shouting outward, reaching inward, straight to the root of everything, including you. That root has a name. And once you understand it, prayer stops feeling like begging and starts feeling like remembering. The monad is one of the oldest ideas in spiritual history, and it's simpler than it sounds. It means the one, the single source behind everything that exists. Not a being sitting on a throne judging you. Not a distant ruler you have to earn favor from. The root itself. The flame before the candles were ever lit. Picture 1,000 candles burning in a dark room. Each one looks separate. Each one flickers on its own. But every single flame came from one original fire. That first fire is the monad. And here's the part that shook me the first time I understood it. You're not separate from that first fire. You're one of the candles. You were lit from it. You're still connected to it, whether you feel that connection or not. The philosopher Plotinus, one of the most important thinkers in shaping how the West understood the One, spent his life trying to describe this. He said everything flows out from a single source, the way light flows from the sun, without the sun losing anything. Nothing is cut off. Nothing is abandoned. Separation is the illusion, not the connection. When I first sat with that idea, it unsettled me. Because it meant every prayer I'd ever said outward, into the sky, hoping something far away would notice me. That whole model was built on a misunderstanding. I wasn't reaching for something distant. I was already part of it. I just forgot. Now go back to Jesus. Look at how often the Gospels describe him doing the same thing. Walking away from the crowd. Going up a mountain alone. Rising before sunrise while everyone else is still asleep, just to be by himself in silence. Most people read that and think he went to pray, and move on without asking what that actually meant in practice. But think about it for a second. If prayer was just words, just requests, he could have said them anywhere. In the crowd, in the temple, out loud, in front of everyone, the way it was normally done at the time. He didn't. He went alone. He went quiet. And I think that's the whole clue. My take is this: that withdrawal wasn't him talking outward into silence. It was him going inward, straight to the root, straight to the monad, and aligning himself with it directly. Not asking permission, not making requests, remembering the connection that was already there and settling into it before he did anything else. That's the difference between prayer and what I've been calling the monad call. Prayer asks. The call remembers. Prayer looks outward for a response. The call goes inward and finds the response was never missing. It was just never noticed. Here's where things get strange, and I want to be careful with how I explain this because it's easy to misunderstand. In certain Gnostic texts, ones found among the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in Egypt back in 1945 after being hidden for close to 1,600 years, there are references to forces called Archons. In that framework, they're described as rulers, gatekeepers, patterns of control that keep a person distracted, fearful, and dependent on looking outside themselves for answers. I don't think you need to picture literal demons plotting in the sky to get value from this. I think the more useful way to understand Archons is as a metaphor for something you already recognize in your own life. The pull toward distraction, the loop of fear-based thinking, the the constant noise that keeps a person from ever going quiet long enough to remember they're connected to something bigger. And here's the payoff, the part that actually explains why the title of this video says what it says. Archons, in this framework, don't feed on your silence. They feed on your looping, on repetition without connection, on you staying outward-facing, begging, waiting, distracted, scared. That loop is their entire food source. The moment a person stops outsourcing their power, stops looking outside for permission, and goes straight to the root instead, that loop has nothing left to feed on. That's the hate, not rage, starvation. The whole system, depending on distraction, loses its grip the second someone goes quiet and connects directly. That's what convinced me this was worth talking about. It's not about evil forces hunting you down. It's about a pattern of control that only works if you stay asleep, distracted, and endlessly outward-facing. So if this idea is so powerful, why did almost nobody teach it to you growing up? Part of the answer is historical. The Gospel of Thomas, another text found in that same Nag Hammadi discovery, records sayings attributed to Jesus that never made it into the Bible most people read today. One of the most striking lines from that gospel says the kingdom is not somewhere far away. It's inside you, and it's spread out all around you, and most people simply don't see it. That kind of teaching is hard to build a religion around. Direct inward knowing doesn't need a building. It doesn't need a hierarchy standing between you and the source. Ritual does. Repetition does. Institutions need something repeatable, something that keeps people coming back and depending on a structure. I don't think this was some cartoonish evil conspiracy to trap people. I think it's simpler and almost sadder than that. Direct knowing teachings are just harder to organize, harder to control, harder to package. So over centuries, the version that survived was the version that needed you outside, asking, waiting, dependent, not the version that told you the connection was already inside you the whole time. So how do you actually do this? How do you move from praying outward to calling inward? It's simpler than you think, and it costs nothing. Sit somewhere quiet. Not for an hour. Even 90 seconds will do to start. Close your eyes. Breathe slow, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And instead of asking for anything, just say to yourself, silently, I am connected to the source I came from. Not begging for it to be true, remembering that it already is. That's it. That's the whole practice. No incense required. No specific words, just stillness, breath, and attention turned inward instead of outward. And remember what we just covered in the Archons segment. This exact practice, this small act of silence, is the thing that pattern of distraction cannot survive. You're not shouting into a loop anymore. You're not feeding the noise. You're going straight to the root, the way Jesus did before dawn, away from the crowd in silence. Try it tonight, not as a religious ritual, as a return. Here's where I land. And I say this with full conviction. Connecting to the source was never about earning an answer. It was never about saying the right words enough times, or being good enough, or waiting long enough for someone far away to finally notice you. It was about remembering you were never separate from it in the first place. You are not a candle cut off from the fire, drifting alone in the dark, hoping the fire someday looks your way. You are still lit from it, right now, in this very moment. The connection didn't go anywhere. You just stopped looking inward long enough to forget it was there. That, to me, is the real teaching hidden underneath centuries of ritual. Not a new God to please. Not a new rule to follow. Just a return to something that was true the entire time. So tonight, before you sleep, try it. 90 seconds. Quiet room. Slow breath. No requests. Just remembering the connection that was always there. You don't need permission to go inward. You never did. If this shifted something in you, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more of these hidden teachings, the ones nobody else is willing to say out loud, subscribe, because we're just getting started. Prayer asked. The call remembers. Which one are you going to choose tonight?